Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Reflections on Liber Cordis Scincti Serpente, Vel 65, sub figura Adonai, the Book of the Heart Girt with the Serpent, Chapter 1, verses 32 through 46. Verse 32. Further, Adonai spake unto V, and said, 33, Let us take our delight in the multitude of men. Let us shape unto ourselves a boat of mother of pearl from them, that we may ride upon the river of Amrit. The conversation between the Magister and their holy angel resumes. The translucent blue of the precious stone, mother of pearl, represents the Sephira Bina, corresponding to the world of Bria above the abyss. This is further symbolized by Amrit, the nectar of immortality exuded from the crown chakra when the Kundalini energy rises through the spinal column to its level. This perspective is fashioned from the multitude of men, meaning it is a transpersonal viewpoint built up from the consideration of human social collectivity, not a supernatural, human independent truth superimposed over and against human experience. Spirit, Hegel recognized, is human communality, and therefore it is indeed appropriate for neshama to be described as shaped and formed out of the species being, or Gattungsdasein, of the multitude. Along these lines, I interpret Bina Bria as corresponding to what Lacan calls the imaginary, which is the gridwork of social language usages upon the background of which subjectivity is linguistically constructed. Awareness of this impersonal background to the self gives increased control over the manifestation of the self, and this is in part the enlightenment facilitated by magic. Verse 34. Thou seest yon petal of amaranth, blown by the wind from the low, sweet brows of Hathor. In Liber Resh, Hathor is the god form of the sun at noon, when it is at its highest point of elevation. The sun corresponds to Tifereth, representing self-consciousness at the center of the Ruach. In the ancient Egyptian language, Hathor means the house of Horus, which I interpret as neshama coming to dwell within the house of the Ruach through the illumination of knowledge and conversation. 35. The Magister saw it and rejoiced in the beauty of it. Listen. Beauty corresponds to Tifereth, reinforcing the symbolism of the previous verse. The Magister is the viewpoint of Bina which sees or understands the process of enlightenment from above, and can therefore establish and oversee the initiatory paradigm within which enlightenment becomes a social possibility, beyond being merely a personal experience. Their rejoicing is their tantric pride or selfless ecstasy, and their ability to listen stands for their comprehension of the whole structure of the mind represented by the lower, below the abyss, Sephiroth of the Tree of Life. 36. From a certain world came an infinite wail. That falling petal seemed to the little ones a wave to engulf their continent. From the limited perspective of the personality of everyday life, illumination threatens the boundaries of accustomed experience and can be seen as dangerous. The psyche is absorbed in the consumption of commodities in capitalist society to the exclusion of other more authentically fulfilling activities. For example, junk food, booze, bad drugs, sleazy social media, and vulgar 40-year-old entertainment IPs. These addictions seek to perpetuate themselves out of anxiety that the unfulfilling pseudo-enjoyment they offer by the consumerist lifestyle will be replaced by something even more boring and futile. False as this fear is, it can overwhelm the uninitiate and block their ability to make progress in the discernment of their true will. 37. So they will reproach thy servant, saying, Who hath set thee to save us? The criticism is valid, although only on a superficial level. There is no higher power that has sent the masters of wisdom to enlighten their fellows. Their wisdom, knowledge, and power are their own justification. Success is your proof. Appeal to naively posited absolutes is the recourse of the ignorant. Yet ignorance has this difficulty. that the fool always thinks themselves to be wise. 38. He will be sore distressed. In contrast, it is the prerogative of wisdom to know its own limitations. The vulgar see this as a weakness, but it is in fact a strength. True wisdom proceeds through skepticism and empirical experimentation, while blind faith and emotionalized prejudice are the recourse of fools and knaves. 39. All they understand not that thou and I are fashioning a boat of mother of pearl. We will sail down the river Amrit, even to the yew groves of Yama, where we may rejoice exceedingly. Yama is the god of death, which is the demise fated for all form, for as the Buddha declares, all compound aggregates are subject to decay. Death is change, both the final demise of an organic life form, as well as the movement from any moment to the next. Enlightenment confers fortitude in the face of death through the understanding of its necessity. More, it gives joy at death in the awareness that existence is pure joy, that all the sorrows are but as shadows, they pass and are done, but there is that which remains. That which remains is the Kabbalistic zero, the indestructibly formless nothingness that is thereby the basis for all form. 40. The joy of men shall be our silver gleam, their woe our blue gleam, all in the mother of pearl. Life is impossible without death, and vice versa. These phenomena are flip sides of the same coin. For the spirit to fulfill its creative potential for being, it must therefore tarry with the negative, as Hegel says. If at first we don't succeed, we must fail and fail again, with the proviso, as Slavoj Žižek puts it, that each time we fail, we also succeed in failing better. 41. The scribe was wroth thereat. He spake, O Adonai and my master, I have borne the inkhorn and the pen without pay, in order that I might search this river of Amrit, and sail thereon as one of ye. This I demand for my fee, that I partake of the echo of your kisses. The parenthetical aside reintroduces the character of the scribe, who is Crowley as Perdurabo of the Outer College, in conversation with Adonai, his holy guardian angel, and with his master, VVVVV, who is Crowley's transpersonal identity above the abyss. And these three are one, and this one is none, in accord with the ultimacy of the Kabbalistic zero. The scribe invokes neshama in order to partake of the echo of its ecstasy. 42. And immediately it was granted unto him. The invocation is successful. Indeed, the text of this holy book appears to qualify as the magical child of the union of Adonai and VVVVV, gestated within the womb of the night of Pan and given birth in the ruach of the scribe. Thus is the creative word manifested according to the formula of Tetragrammaton, with Adonai as Yod, VVVVV as He, the scribe as Vav, and the written text of the holy book as He final. 43. Nay, but not therewith was he content. By an infinite abasement unto shame did he strive. Then a voice. Why is the scribe not content? Because the unity, to be the true unity, must also include the duality, according to the magical formula 0 equals 2. Therefore, the abasement and the shame of the scribe, who symbolizes the ruach of the natural person, are also modes of striving after the full actualization of their potentiality for being, which are ultimately not separable from the true will, representing but a portion of the curve of the full trajectory of the star self in the company of heaven. However, provisionally, they may practically prove to be distractions from the great work as well, in which case they would need to be contextually overcome in turn. Failure is useful if it leads to success. Otherwise, it is simply failure, and this is at least magically uninteresting, ignoring more serious ethical consequences. Also, whenever Crowley's text talks about shame and abasement, there is usually a queer subtext implied. Shame, it must be remembered, is a socially constructed category, while the absoluteness of the Kabbalistic zero transcends all such relative virtual categories. 44. Thou strivest ever? Even at thy yielding thou strivest to yield, and lo, thou yieldest not. On a subtle level, the striving after attainment itself impedes attainment. Ecstasy is the basic quality of our being. Therefore, it cannot be achieved, but only recognized as that which inherently underlies all experience. Regardless, one cannot simply decide not to seek, for this is simply more seeking. Likewise, having entered the path of the wise, one cannot return to the ways of the vulgar and uninitiated, without the direst karmic consequences. For this is not the victory of yielding to the ecstasy of being, but only to cowardly surrender to the domination of the lost and ignorant. 45. Go thou into the outermost places and subdue all things. One must instead exhaust seeking through seeking, thereby negating the negation and releasing the creative drive of the dialectical movement of their being in the world. The magician should traverse the fantasy of their desire, making conscious the otherwise unconscious patterning of the imaginary, so their true will can be discerned, defined as their authentic relationship to their context, creatively mediated through the structural contents of the psyche. Spinoza argues that all living beings possess a conatus, an innate will towards self-flourishing, which I read as equivalent to the Thelemic concept of the true will, and that ethical normativity should be oriented towards this principle, in contrast to obedience to an alleged human external supernatural reality. There is no supernatural reality for Spinoza. For him, infinity is immanent in and as the infinite cosmos, whose self-consciousness is instantiated as the human mind. Therefore, the magician cannot withdraw from the world or from their own mind, but must seek the solution to the riddle of the true will in the outermost places, both without and within. 46. Subdue thy fear and disgust, then yield. All inherited prejudices are an impediment to the discernment of the true will. The gnosis of the true will is a calculus that is beyond good and evil in a vulgar sense. The magician must overcome the socially constructed and therefore ultimately illusory duality of the pure and the impure. Only from this perspective does the true morality of love under will become possible, based on impersonal compassion unfettered by ignorant biases. Fear and disgust are instinctual responses of the lizard brain, or nephesh in Kabbalistic terms. They are affective responses to perceived threats, yet they lack the capacity to evaluate whether these apparent threats are reality or illusion. The mindfulness of reason, represented by the Ruach, must be cultivated to offset this disadvantage. Love is the law, love under will.